Welcome to our masterclass on CV writing and writing motivational letters. We are here with Sharon Mwamanda. She is a human resources professional with a master's degree in social science from the University of Cape Town. She has a background in talent acquisition as a talent acquisition manager in the IT sector and a human resources consultant, both in the tourism and social sectors, where she has worked in Kenya, South Africa, Tanzania, and the USA. So quite an international butterfly as well. Sharon is currently part of the LifeCheck HR team, focusing on HR and recruitment, and is the founder of Career Key, an organization focusing on helping graduates and young professionals like yourselves develop skills that prepare you for the working world. Welcome, Sharon.
Hi, Janine. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I am very well, and we are so excited to have you here today and your expertise. So thank you for making yourself available to SBF and to the students.
Absolutely.
And today we are going to start with focusing on CV writing and then move across to motivational letters. So what we will start focusing on is the physical appearance of a CV and exactly what to include. We're then going to move across to qualifications, experience, and achievement, and particularly answering that question, so what to do if I don't have experience? What do I include in my CV? And then how do I change my CV to match a job description? JD is the short term, but how do you actually individualize and work through that process? How to include references, who to ask, and then a very easy 4-step process to follow to create your CV. And lastly, moving on to motivational letters. And if it's okay, Sharon, I'm just going to ask you a series of questions and then you'll speak to that.
Sure, great. Sounds great.
So the first one is the physical appearance of a CV when it comes to fonts, layout, color, and columns. So our students and alumni want to know, what is the best thing to do in this case?
That's a great question. And I think the important thing to remember is that your CV is actually your first place in the door. So you want to ensure that you are providing your best foot forward. So when it comes to the fonts, the layout, the color of your CV, I would always say the first rule of thumb is to keep it simple. So you want to be able to present yourself to the employer without them having to search through multiple layers of information, of colors, of different fonts, but rather make it plain and simple. So the first tip that I would say is always be consistent and provide legible font. So be consistent in terms of the font. If you choose to use one type of font, continue that. Continue that even with the size of the font. So for example, I think I gave an example of a really great CV and a CV that isn't so great. The great CV would be one that has, if you're going to use size 14 font, be consistent with that, as opposed to using size 14 on one space and then size 10 on another. You'd rather be consistent, and that makes it easier on the eye to look at as well, and to read through and look at your information. So make sure that you're consistent. Make sure the font size is also big enough to read. I would always encourage that you use, the best color would be using black or a darker color like a dark blue, but I would just encourage black, as that is currently the standard for professional presentation of a CV. And pay attention to your line spacing in your columns. So ensure that your line spacing, again, is consistent throughout your CV document, as well as your columns as well. I always encourage when people present CVs and cover letters as well, is to go and justify. So when you are done typing it, instead of then aligning to the left or to the right, I would center it. So it's called the justify option. So I would just encourage that, again, be consistent, legible font, using really dark colors just in order for it to stand out and be presented well, especially since the white background is generally what we use for our CVs, as well as paying attention to your line spacing and your columns as well.
Awesome. Thank you. That is really, really helpful. And today, in today's world with information overload, what is the best number of pages to use for a CV?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say no more than 2 pages. It's always best to have a 1-page CV. Like you said, with these days with information overload, the same thing happens when we put out job members in the human resource space. We get hundreds of applicants, and it takes a lot of time to really pay attention and go through the CV. So we always encourage that our applicants bring forward either a one-pager if they can, but of course, the more experience that you gain, the longer your CV might be. So we encourage that you try and reduce it to 2 pages. And I think that really also forces you to think about what is important, what is it that you want to actually share and present, and really keeping it straight to the point and really tailoring it to that specific job. So maximum 2 pages, but if you can put it within 1 page neatly, then I would encourage a one-pager.
Wow, that has definitely changed in time. I remember back in the day, my CV was 4 or 5 pages. So definitely worth considering and making it succinct, as Sharon was saying. So there's a lot of software around to make things really fancy. We've got Canva, we've got Leaply. What do you think about using software like this to juice up your CV?
That's a great question. And I think, like you said again, I think when I think back to when I was also starting to apply in the job market, there weren't all these amazing platforms and tools to use. So you kind of had to figure out how to draft your own CV. So when it comes to now using Leaply or Canva, I would say absolutely. You want to be able to put your best foot forward. And if there are professionals that have already provided you with platforms and a guidance or a template, then definitely use it, because I think, number one, it helps you create a professional CV. Number two, it helps you to save time. So instead of you kind of sitting and adjusting and updating your CV, you can now just go download a template and just populate your own information. And like you said, information these days is just really a constant thing. So you don't necessarily have all the time in the world to go and draft a new CV every time. So I would say definitely go for using a downloadable template and store that. And then that way you can also customize it to each job instead of feeling stressed out about creating a fresh CV. I also believe that it makes it easier for you to structure your information because they provide you with a guideline. I know a lot of times the questions around how to draft a CV, everyone asks, do I put my name first? Do I put my phone number first? Do I put my experience first, or do I put my education first? And with these templates, it's lovely that it really helps you to actually then just go in and populate your information based on what the professionals have said is the best standard. So it's easier to structure your information that way. And it also helps you to keep it simple. I've had a look at a lot of the Canva templates and some from Leaply as well. And what I loved about them is that they also help you to keep it simple. So it's not too much information. There's not too many colors or images on their templates. It really is simple, straightforward, and it's exactly what as potential HR or employers actually want to see. So I'd encourage, yes, use them absolutely. If they do have if they do have their logo, I would encourage that you perhaps remove that logo, because you also want to show that you drafted this yourself, even though you had the help of Canva or Leaply. But if you do find that the template has their logo, I would encourage that you either try and remove the logo. I know for some of these pages, you'd have to maybe pay, a couple rands to remove the logo. But with Canva and Leaply, it's great because they actually don't add their logo. But just keep that in mind as well when downloading a CV from the internet.
So what I'm taking away from this is keep it short, keep it simple, use the basics, nothing fancy, and 2 pages at most. So that's going to take some thought, definitely. And speaking about fancy, a lot of CVs we see these days, particularly in the creative spaces, use infographics, and it looks like a Picasso masterpiece. And I want to know, when we look at it, it's often easy to say, oh, I feel like mine should look like that too, because it's just so creative and, it's edgy. So what are your opinions on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, I think it's definitely exciting to have opportunities where you can show off your creativity, right? By introducing infographics or other pieces that show your creative edge. And what I would say is that, because again, there's a lot of reasons that employers are just looking through CVs very quickly and want to get the most important information as soon as possible, I would then encourage, keep it simple once again. So unless requested by the hiring manager, we prefer generally the traditional CVs. So over the infographic resumes, unless of course you are a designer design professional, so then definitely show off that creative edge. But if it is really just for a job, let's say in sales or in marketing, I would keep it simple. I think another reason why I encourage that you keep it simple as well is that sometimes it could be a bit difficult to pull off that amazing infographic on your resume. And you would rather then create a traditional, simple one that can get you in the door, and then you can show off your skills later, as opposed to maybe creating one that for you maybe was, what you thought was your most amazing infographic, but maybe because you're applying to a place where they have high-tech designers, for them it would look like maybe not as strong. So I would then encourage that you rather just wait until you are requested either in round 2 as one of their exercises to present an infographic. Then you have an opportunity to show off your skills. Another thing which is really important is that these days a lot of companies are using applicant tracking systems. And this is more of an analytical tool that actually scans through specific keywords that are in your CV. And that makes it a lot quicker for us as the employer to actually then get the best and the strongest CVs for that specific job to come to our inboxes, and all the others would then be saved for a future job at a later stage. So if you add infographics, it makes it difficult for the applicant tracking system to actually pick up those keywords. And therefore your CV might be missed, not because it's not an amazing CV with great skills, but because the applicant tracking systems and how they're built are still not yet sophisticated enough to actually pick up infographics. So again, just going back to the basics in order for your CV to be picked up from these systems. And what I would say is that instead of using infographics on a CV, I would supplement this on a post on a professional database like your LinkedIn profile, where you can actually then upload amazing infographics or have a link to your website where you can actually share these, or attach it as well to a separate attach it as well separately. So I would first put a simple CV, the straightforward CV, and then your more creative one as well. There's no harm in, using both at the same time, as long as the employee then can get the best of both worlds from you. But again, I think in this space, what I would do is save your infographics for your LinkedIn or for any other platforms that you are currently using to present yourself to the employer, because we do look at LinkedIn profiles and that's the best place to keep that.
Thank you. So interesting, particularly the piece around the application tracking system, which is being used to sift through CVs. So you really want to have those keywords in there. And then the most important piece that a lot of our alumni and particularly postgraduate students are asking, and that is, what is more important, qualifications or experience? So could you tell us a little bit about that, and particularly answering the question, what if I don't have experience? What do I include in my CV in that case? And then if we could wrap up that part of the conversation with high school achievements, how important are they? Do I leave them out? So if you could answer these questions, that would be great.
Yeah. And this is a really good question. I think, especially for me, when I think back to when I started applying fresh out of university, that was the biggest question, right? Which is qualifications or experience, and what happens before you get that experience. What can you add to your CV? So the first thing that I would say is that give the employer the information that sets you apart. If you don't have experience yet, then your qualifications are going to set you apart. Your high school achievements, the volunteer work that you do, work that you do in the church, or work that you do in your spare time, helping in a family business or a friend's business. Those are the kinds of things to include. So what's more important? I think both are equally as important, and it really is dependent on where you're at in terms of your academic career as well as maybe your working career. So what I would do is that if you only have qualifications and don't have experience yet, I would shed a light on the qualifications, definitely. The spaces where you performed extremely well at school, I would highlight that. If you got 98% in economics, I would highlight that because it shows that you are a high achiever. If you well, a prefect in high school, I would highlight that because it does show that you were trusted by the school institution to actually lead and support other students. Like I said, if you're volunteering, if you are working in a family business, if you started your own small business, if in your spare time you do graphic design work, I think those are the amazing spaces that actually still count as experience. So I think with a lot of students, what they fear is that they don't have tangible experience in the work environment, but you have some kind of experience if you've volunteered, worked, done stuff in your spare time. So they're both equally as important. I would shed light on both and ensure that you are matching your experience, whether it's voluntary experience or actual paid experience. I would match that to the job that you're currently looking for. So different jobs need different items. If you are applying to a social enterprise or nonprofit organization, your volunteer experience is important. If you are applying for a sales job, maybe that time when you started a small business in high school, buying and selling something, that actually does count as well. Or if you took up an extra course in university just to teach you about communication skills, for example, then that would be something to highlight. So that's where I would say focus your attention on, and also shine your light on any non-work related skills that you might have picked up. I tell this a lot to people who maybe, for example, play sport, right, as what they did in university. I would say if you're playing as part of a team, you're already picking up skills. Teamwork is a skill, and it's something that is of value to your future employer. We want someone who's a team player. If you were the captain of your cricket club, that already shows that you have leadership skills. So highlight that as well. If you were an individual contributor to a specific sport, then it also shows that you can work independently. So shine light on non-work related skills as well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, again, work experience, but it is experience on the field. It is something that you are picking up. So I would say in the same way that you manage your social media accounts and always want your Instagram or your Facebook or your LinkedIn to be presentable and current and really showing off your passions, that's how I would also present my CV, is to really show your best foot forward in terms of your passions, your skills, what you've picked up, where you've excelled, and really try and share that with your future employer. And just to answer your question as well about including high school achievements, I would say it depends. So again, we go back to the maximum 2-page CV rule. So if in 2 pages you've already included your current qualifications and your experience, that's more than enough. If you're in a space where you don't necessarily have as much information around qualifications and experience, then definitely add on the high school achievements to really boost up your CV and add some volume and some weight to it. So that's what I would think about before adding the high school achievements, is how long is my current CV and how valuable will that information be to the future employer? Yeah.
And some very valuable points that you mentioned there around the soft skills like teamwork that can be picked up in team sports. I know that we're not covering it in this masterclass, but if we have to think around the CV, what are some of the soft skills that employers are really looking for these days that students and alumni can start thinking about to include?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we look for that more than anything, because I think job training, we can train you to do the job. But the soft skills, like you just mentioned, Janine, are so important, and it's difficult to teach those. It's either you have them or you really need to work on building them. So the soft skills that we generally look for, especially for every employer across the board, is someone that has excellent communication skills. So whether that's written communication, because whether you're talking to our clients one day, whether you're talking to your colleagues, your written communication is going to be extremely important. And that you can pick up from so many spaces, whether it is the English literature class that you took on, whether it is from, again, some volunteer work where you had to send emails to potential donors and that kind of thing. So your communication skills are very key. Your verbal communication skills as well. So whether you pick that up, again, from working with a team, you really have to practice how to communicate effectively with each other. So I would say that is a space where, you shouldn't take it for granted. You're picking up that skill. So your verbal and your written communication are very key. Being a team player, I mean, every job that you work in these days, you're going to work with other people. And you need to be able to be a team player, because we're all playing at the end of the day for the same team. So in the same way, in your soccer team, in your hockey team, in your cricket team, you're actually playing for one goal as a unit. That's what we're really looking for in the next hire that we make, is someone that can really work with people, someone that can effectively manage communication, someone that can professionally agree or disagree, but still at the end of the day, we are playing for the same team. So I'd say teamwork is really key. Your communication skills are really key. And someone that is also punctual, someone that knows how to keep to deadlines, someone that knows when they need to take responsibility for something. So in the same way, when it comes to your written assignments at school, you have to keep to a specific deadline in order to pass that course or that class. That is a skill that you're already picking up, that you know how to work to a specific deadline. You know how to communicate if you can't meet that deadline. I think that is a skill that is really of value in the kind of person that I think would make an amazing addition to any team. So I think those are the core ones that really build the foundation. All the others you can continue to learn and you continue to improve, but as long as you're an amazing communicator, as long as you know how to stick to deadlines and work with a team, you will definitely succeed within the workspace.
Fantastic. So those are the three key things to include and to think about: teamwork, communication, and timekeeping.
Yeah.
And then if we have to look at applying for different types of work, obviously you can't use the same CV for every type of job that you're going to apply for. So how do you actually go about changing up your CV to meet the different types of job requirements and specs out there?
That's a great question. And I love what you said there about, that one CV is definitely not going to match to every single role. So you really have to ensure, again, that you are standing out to the future employer. And if we just reflect back on what we talked about earlier about the applicant tracking systems, generally what those do is they pick up specific keywords. So that means you definitely have to stay on top of tailoring your CV to each job that you're applying for. And how you do that is, number one, read the job description carefully. So don't just read the job description just as an overview of, yeah, great, I can do that, but actually understand what it is you think they're looking for within that right candidate, as well as researching the company itself. So it's one thing to have someone that matches the job description. It's in a whole nother level if you get someone that is also matching the values and the mission of your company. So I would read both of those in order to tailor your CV. So for example, if one of the values of the company is professionalism, find a way to bring that about within your CV or within your experience, as well as in the job description. If they're looking for someone that is good with people or good with public speaking, for example, then it's great to actually show how you were in the debate team, or it's great to show how you went to a Toastmasters class, or you were in the drama class, for example. And that really shows someone that feels confident about having these discussions in front of a large group of people. So read the job description, but also the company, and see how you can then tailor your experience to actually match the values and the mission of the company, as well as what they're looking for within the job description. And then see if you can also find out more about the company culture and find ways that you can include this. So for example, I worked at a company where they were so passionate about cycling, and that was just part of the company culture. They actually sponsored a lot of their teammates to ride the Argus, for example. And it was lovely to see when we had applicants who actually say in their spare time, they've also done some really exciting sports, or they've really competed in something, that's more like on a larger scale. And that for us really speaks to the kind of person that we want as a part of our team, because part of our culture was cycling and staying active. So it was nice when we got applicants as well that were passionate about the same thing. So read into the company culture, and also see again how you can add, under hobbies to really stand out, where we can see that you're going to be a great fit as well within the company culture. And then also including your volunteer work, any charity work, a blog that you write, a YouTube channel that you started, an Instagram page that you started on photography, for example, or sports that you were involved in, because that also humanizes the applicant. I mean, we definitely want a space where when we are hiring for the next person or for the next role, we don't want robots to join the team. We want people that also show their human side. They also show show what they actually enjoy doing and how, again, that speaks to our company culture. So, for example, if you write a blog that inspires, young children in the neighborhood, for example, if there's charity work that you do, if you're involved in specific sports, if you're in the drama committee, those are also really good ways to show your individuality and your originality to the future employer. So again, you're not just another applicant, but now we can actually see Janine stand out from that CV. So I would encourage that those are the best things to do when trying to edit your job for the different job requirements. I would also especially pick out those keywords and phrases. So there's no harm in actually quoting a phrase that you've seen on their website. There's no harm at all in adding the words from the job description. So if they're looking for a sales consultant, if you were in a job that was a sales consultant role, but maybe you had a different job title, I would then change that just so the applicant tracking system and the employers can pick out the word sales in there. So it sees that it speaks directly to the job description. So I'd edit some of your words, or I'd change your skills again, just to make sure that they are specific to the job that they're looking for. So if we're looking for someone that is creative, I would then ensure that you highlight a space where you had to be creative, whether that was through building your own small business, whether that was through a challenge that was part of your university requirements, whether that was through, any kind of space that you've been involved in. I would then highlight that. And again, that really speaks to the applicant tracking systems being able to scan and pick out your CV as soon as possible. And the final point as well that I'd make, Janine, is that what I do for myself is I keep a template of my CV within Google Docs that makes it easier to actually edit at all times. So just download a CV template, make sure that you keep one that you can constantly edit. It makes it so much easier than having to re-download every single time and then edit it, but rather put your key information in there and then just ensure that you change it to the job. But always remember that when you're applying for another company, make sure that the name that you put in there actually relates to the company that you're applying for. Many times I've seen CVs that I guess have been reused for multiple applications, but then it would have another company name and not our company name. So that just shows that this applicant may not have been paying attention or is applying for multiple jobs and just spam mailed us their CV as well. So always make sure that you are then adding in the name of the business it is that you're applying for. Make sure the job title is correct for the business that you're applying for, in order to ensure that, again, you are really trying to build that one-on-one relationship with the company.
So the two things that I'm taking away from this is do your research, research, and pay careful attention. Yeah. If you do your research, you can individualize it, you can meet them where they're at, you can include all the things that make you human and speak to that, the company culture, the hobbies, and by paying careful attention. Now we are moving on to references. So should one include references in the CV? Is that best practice, or should we only do it when it's specifically asked for? And then the last question is, who are the best types of people typically to include in a reference, in your references?
Great question. I would say when it comes to references, lately it's become optional. I think back in the day, it was more of a mandatory practice. Lately, it has become optional, but I would say if you're not including your references, always include at the bottom that reference is available upon request. That at least shows the employer that you are willing to be forthcoming with reference information. When I look at it from my perspective, I would appreciate if an applicant does include their references, only because if they get to that stage where they are successful, instead of me having to phone them and they have to phone their references and that takes time, it's easier for me just to say, hi, so-and-so, I'm calling your references now. You've listed these two people. Are you comfortable for me to call them? It's just a quick yes, I get to call them. We speed up the offer process. So for that reason, I would say if you do have references, I would say include them. But the most important thing is to always ensure that you ask your reference for permission before adding their names to your CV. I think that is number one, important from just a professionalism standard, right? In order to respect someone else's personal information, because it is their phone number or their email address and their full name being shared. So I would first of all ask your reference if they're comfortable. But second of all, when it gets to that point that your reference is potentially going to get a phone call, I would just have a courtesy text message or call to them just to say, hi, so-and-so, I put you down as my reference as agreed, but I just wanted you to know that you should expect a phone call from this specific company about my application. It also just ensures that you keep that relationship with your reference, but it also makes sure that they are also prepared to remember to pick up their phone and have the conversation. So that's what I would say. So if your CV again is over 2 pages long, I wouldn't then elongate the CV even more just to add your references. So that's where I'd say put references upon request. But if your CV is quite short and again, you just want to add that additional information, I would then add the reference checks. And it's generally 3 things: their email address, a phone number that we can reach them on, as well as their full name and what their role was. So whether they were your previous manager, whether they were your lecturer, those are important spaces. Who are the best people to include? So this can be anyone that you felt had either a mentorship or a management relationship with you. So if you haven't worked full-time yet and you don't yet have a manager that you reported to, I would put a lecturer or a supervisor that you worked quite closely with when you were studying, because they would also be able to give great insight into if you reached your deadlines, if you were excellent at communication, if you were very creative in how you presented your thoughts or your arguments when it came to your schoolwork. So those are the kinds of people that I would include if you don't yet have any work experience. But the more work experience you have, fantastic. Or if you volunteered somewhere, then I would put the head of that organization where you volunteered. I would put then your supervisor or your manager if you have had some work experience, because that will really help us to get insight into how you present and perform within the workspace. Another thing that I would encourage as well is getting recommendations on LinkedIn. You can never have too many of those. So on LinkedIn, you are actually allowed to click a button that says, get me a recommendation, and it actually immediately can email the person that you want, and it just says, hi, so-and-so, I'd love for you to please put a recommendation on my LinkedIn page. And it really is just a short, quick thing that anyone, again, who has managed you before or a lecturer can help you to give you that extra boost, because as employers, we do look at LinkedIn pages, and it's always lovely to see when someone has brilliant recommendations from previous clients or lecturers or previous employers as well. It's just a nice way for not only you to say great things about yourself as an applicant, but now to hear it from others as well. So that's just one pointer and one tip that I would encourage as well. But in terms of references, definitely just try and include at least 2 references if possible, or say references upon request.
Fantastic. And I love that tip about LinkedIn. And it's definitely something that one can start doing and should continue doing throughout your career, because potential employers will always be looking there, and to have a bunch of glowing references is definitely going to stand you in good stead.